All right. Hi again, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our live webinar today. So we're going to be having an expert roundtable discussion covering everything you need to know about changing online privacy parameters and how marketers can still create successful campaigns. My name is Caroline Cox, and I am the Content Marketing Manager here at HawkSEM, and I will be hosting today's webinar. So I'll introduce you to our amazing trio of speakers in just a bit, but first, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So as you know, today's webinar is using the Zoom platform. You can join the audio from your computer, laptop, tablet, phone, whatever works for you. I'm sure by now you're very familiar with this platform. And if you have any questions during the webinar, you can just type them into that Q&A box. It should be on the lower side of your Zoom panel, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end where we'll address as many questions as time allows. And this webinar is being recorded, so we will share a link to the recording within the next few days if you have to hop off early or arrive late, things like that. So yeah, let's get started. So and now a little bit about Hawk. So we are a full service digital marketing agency. These are just some of the services we offer, everything from SEO and paid social ads to content marketing, and of course, paid search and remarketing as well. Just, a little bit about what makes us different. There are a lot of agencies out there, we know. So what's different about us? First is our conversion IQ system. This is our patent pending smart way of marketing. It ensures we're always focused on revenue, not just traffic. We're all what we call marketing scientists. So we don't have a separate dedicated analytics team because everyone on our team, every account manager is a data-driven marketing scientist. We only employ senior managers, so we don't have any junior marketers working on our accounts. It's all senior talent. And then we pride ourselves on being strategists who execute. So that means we don't just give you a to-do list. We actually come up with those best practices and then we make them happen for you. And then, of course, we focus on the human touch. We don't set it and forget it. We're always iterating and testing new things on campaigns. And lastly, we have extensive expertise across lead gen, e-commerce, SEO, PPC, all that good stuff. We work with companies like Sierra Nevada University, Escape the Room, Blue Sky, and Verizon Media, among others that you can see here. So now I'm going to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Jenny Palmer. You can read all about her here. She is the Director of Marketing Ops here at Hawk. She specializes in SEM, SEO, and paid social. She's all about increasing revenue for clients and has worked in a ton of different industries: travel, tourism, health and wellness, e-commerce. And in her free time, she enjoys rock climbing, traveling, and creating new recipes for her food blog. And then next up, we have Connie Redfield. She is a lead strategist here at Hawk. She's worked in digital marketing for more than 6 years across verticals like healthcare, hospitality, finance, e-commerce, education. She's super data driven and is an expert in all things PPC and social media marketing. And in her free time, she loves walking with her dog, taking care of her plants, rooting for her favorite sports teams, and sampling different kinds of gin. Can't relate to that. And then last but certainly not least, we've got Maria Smart. She is the Director of Marketing Strategy here at Hawk. She's worked in digital marketing for more than 7 years with clients across verticals, healthcare, hospitality, SaaS, e-commerce. She's also super data driven. She's our SEO expert for all things SEO, and she enjoys playing Frisbee with her dogs, gardening, and skiing. So we're going to start off with a little stat. Only about 1/3 of internet users worldwide are aware of their country's data protection and privacy rules. And so that's kind of one of the reasons we're having this discussion today. Big brands like Google and Apple have recently made these significant changes to how they track people online and through their smartphones. And in the digital marketing space, you've certainly probably heard chatter about this, or you've maybe noticed pop-ups around data tracking come up on your phone yourself. And some of these changes are confusing, or they're not super well understood by the general population. So that's why we wanted to kind of break it down a bit so that you can understand, and then your clients, your customers, or even like your higher ups can kind of understand it better to know what we're dealing with. So before I pass it to our speakers, we're going to do a really quick poll. And this is just to see kind of what your current level of knowledge of online privacy and data tracking is. Obviously, there's no right answer, but just to kind of see who in the audience, where everyone's at. So I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to take the poll, and then I will end it and share the results. So I'll give everyone a few more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and end this. So I'm going to share the results. It looks like we've got a good mix, a lot of beginners, intermediate, advanced. That's great. And that, we're going to be kind of going over the basics and getting into a few more specifics. So I think that no matter what your level of knowledge is, you'll definitely find something valuable here. So these are the main topics we're going to be covering today. It's going to be Apple's major iOS update, the quote unquote death of third-party cookies, and then Google's new flock tracking technology. And then we're also going to go over some action items of what you can do to combat or to deal with these changes. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our speakers.
Hi guys, it's Jenny here. So the first one we want to cover is Apple's major iOS 14 update. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. It's really caused a lot of controversy and discussion throughout the community. Essentially, what changed with the release of iOS 14 is that Apple implemented their new, what they call the Apple Tracking Transparency Framework. So now all apps on the iOS phones will need to request permission to track users. You can see in this picture, that's kind of what this pop-up is going to look like. You will be able to include a sentence to prompt the user why you would like to track them. But if they don't click allow, then you won't be able to track them. It will zero out their identifier for the app. So this is a pretty big deal because we're seeing that a very large percentage of people are obviously asking the apps not to track. There's a couple things you already should have done or should definitely do immediately if you haven't already, and you're running Facebook ads. You need to verify your domain with Facebook. So when you go into the platform, there's a new tab that's for resources. It will let you know what action items you haven't yet completed. But number one is to verify your domain. And then number two is to look in their new aggregated event measurement tool. This new tool is Facebook's way of helping add a little transparency into the data with this new iOS rollout. So you'll need to go in and prioritize your events, because if someone does opt out, the Facebook ads platform will only be able to pass one event, whichever one you deem the highest priority. So if you haven't verified your domain and set up your event priorities in the aggregated event measurement tool, definitely check that out. But also look in your resources tab and see if there's any other items that Facebook is prompting you to complete.
Hey everyone, this is Connie here. Like Jenny said, a lot of people have been asking apps not to track them. I think the latest data is about 96% have opted out of tracking, which of course has made ripples across the advertising community, especially on the paid social platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. For smaller businesses, I think it's definitely hit home a lot harder. A lot of businesses, especially those with limited marketing budgets, do rely on things like Facebook remarketing for for that kind of visibility around the country or around the globe. So it's definitely taken a toll. I think a lot of people have seen their all visitors and retargeting audiences really decline. There's been warnings in the Facebook platform about it, that these audiences may be smaller due to the Apple iOS update. So it's really important that you can pivot from where you are, take the learnings from what you've been seeing, and just kind of react to this. So one of the things that we've been kind of recommending for people is to, still continue to use Facebook retargeting audiences if it's viable, potentially even, opening them up, and look at customer list first party data, which we'll kind of go over in a little bit. Lookalike audiences, and just reaching out and testing new prospecting audiences, even the ones that seem potentially a little far-fetched. Another thing that you can do to kind of leverage your Facebook marketing and still maintain it is to switch to using the Facebook conversion API over using the Facebook pixel. So it does require a little bit more development, but it doesn't lose as much visibility as the Facebook pixel and the opt-out does.
And I think something to really consider is Facebook has a lot of their own first party data. Like Connie said, we're going to get into that. But really leveraging the audiences that Facebook enables you to build based on interests and demographics, these changes to tracking aren't affecting Facebook's ability to know which people follow certain brands and like certain types of topics on Facebook. That's all data that the users have given the platform. So really leveraging those demographic and interest targets can really help because that's Facebook's data. They own that. You don't need to identify individuals to use that targeting. Perfect. So this kind of gets into the first party and third party data conversation. You've probably heard that third party cookies are going away. And so kind of what does that mean? I think it helps to start with kind of a definition and the difference between what first party data is versus third party. So a first party cookie is a piece of data that's stored on a user's computer while they're viewing a website. A first party cookie would be set by that specific website. They allow the site owners to collect anonymous data to try and improve the user experience. So, for example, an e-commerce website that might be showing you similar products that you may like based on your browsing. Third-party cookies, on the other hand, are set by, you guessed it, the third party. So this is someone other than the website owner. Third-party cookies have kind of become synonymous for tracking, retargeting, and ads. So when we talk about cookie depreciation, we're really talking about the removal of third-party cookies. First-party cookies and first-party data are not going to be affected by these new policy changes. So a big part of why this is going away and why people are shifting kind of their views is privacy concerns. So third-party cookies really have given a lot more visibility into the individual versus kind of a more general segmented audience. And that's where users feel a little uncomfortable. And so these platforms are trying to find an alternate solution.
And it's important to note that Firefox and Safari are already blocking third-party cookies, and I think they have been for the last couple of years. I think Firefox was the first one to do it. So it's really about Google Chrome, which is kind of the biggest, internet browser that most people prefer to use. So it's definitely going to have an impact, as everything in the privacy world has had so far and will continue to have. So it's just another pivot. I think that the biggest thing to do is to remain vigilant, to rely on that first party data that you have, look at it, really kind of understand what your target audience is, who your target visitors are. I think the biggest impact immediately will be on dynamic retargeting for e-commerce. So those ads that kind of follow you around and show you the products that you have viewed on something like Amazon, and then you go to another site and you see that that same product following you, that's kind of going to be going away. But it's going to put a lot more pressure on advertisers to really think about who they're targeting, who they're trying to reach. There's going to be a bigger shift towards custom audiences, display topics, discovery ads. So Google has already been preparing for a lot of this, and we'll get into this in a little bit. But Google has been putting a lot of emphasis on their display and YouTube, the success of those alternate type of platforms, to make sure that everyone's kind of ready for the death of third-party cookies.
And of course, Google has a plan. This isn't their first rodeo. A lot has changed in digital marketing over the years, and it will just continue to change. So Google has been trying to get ahead of this and come up with their own solution before really removing these third-party cookies. So Flock is Google's alternative for third-party cookies. It stands for Federated Learning of Cohorts. So this is a quote from Google specifically about it. Flock can provide an effective replacement signal for third-party cookies. Our tests of Flock to reach an in-market and affinity Google audiences shows that advertisers can expect to see at least 95% of the conversions per dollar spent when compared to cookie-based advertising. So they're pretty confident in this. They've spent a lot of time testing this, and they think this is going to be a viable solution to still have that targeted marketing, but without the personally identified information. So a little bit about Flock. So Flock is the new tracking technology. As I mentioned, it stands for Federated Learning of Cohorts. It is essentially interest-based advertising. So Google will be creating clusters of large groups of people with similar interests. So this approach effectively will hide an individual in the crowd, and it'll use on-device processing to keep a person's web history private on the browser. So they'll still be tracking the web history, but rather than specifically identifying that you looked at the red t-shirt, it will put you into a group with similar users with similar interests, similar actions to create these kind of cohorts. So still giving you that hyper-targeted segmented audience capabilities, but without that individually identified person.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember about all of this is that even with Apple, with Google, all of the updates with privacy policies, these increases will not stop advertisers from reaching consumers. So it's a matter of, like Jenny said, going from customers to cohorts. So instead of reaching someone at that individual level, we're all going to be kind of grouped into larger buckets, and hopefully we'll see better, more relevant ads than we had been seeing in the past. So I think that it will make a better user experience for both advertisers and consumers. It's just going to be a little bit of a jolt in the beginning.
I think this is actually gonna give advertisers a really great opportunity to expand their reach. I think in the last few years, people have gotten really attached to remarketing, dynamic remarketing, because they think, oh, well, it converts so much better. But you're really missing out on the opportunity to find new potential customers and really focus on your audiences versus just some person who is browsing your website. So these new cohorts should really expand our ability to reach people who are our target audience and really take that audience segmentation to the next level, specifically in Google Ads. So the timeline for this, Google has been testing it already. They're going to continue testing it through 2021, but their roadmap is saying that by this time next year, they think it'll fully be rolled out. So not happening right away, but it's definitely in the works.
Yeah, so like Jenny said, definitely start thinking about your target audience and reaching new people, not just the same people that have been to your site and are aware of your brand already.
Awesome. So this is Caroline. I'm going to interject really quick and launch one other poll this one actually is going to be a little pop quiz. So what percentage of US internet users believe online privacy is a myth or doesn't exist? So we've got 1%, 9%, 33%, 50%, or 87%. And it doesn't show who's answering, so it's okay if you get it wrong. I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to weigh in, and then I will show the results of what everyone thinks, and then I will give you the answer on the next slide. Still have a few people answering. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this. All right, it looks like most people think 87, followed by 33. And then a few people think 1%. So let's see who is right. So only 9% of US internet users believe online privacy is a myth or doesn't exist. That's just another reason to, be having this conversation today. So we've got about 40 more minutes. I'll hand things back over to our speakers, and they will talk about common myths when it comes to online privacy. They'll talk a little bit about SEO, and then we'll talk about what this means for the future of marketing.
Hi guys, it's Jenny again. So super interesting. Initially I would also think that the number would be way higher, but this really shows us that, brands have really worked to build trust from the consumers and the users, and especially with their websites and how they're building their websites and communicating what they're tracking them for and having that transparency. Many people in the US actually feel comfortable with websites and navigating the web. It's not as high as you would think. So with that, there's kind of a lot of other myths around online privacy, specifically from the customer side, from brand side. So we just wanted to talk about some of these myths and get some clarification. So the first one is, what do consumers get wrong about tracking? I think that they have a hard time differentiating between analytics and traffic tracking versus that personal information tracking. So, are they getting my phone number, my name? Do they know where I live? Or how are they following me around the internet? So I think that a lot of consumers don't understand that most tracking is just basic analytics. It doesn't have any personally identified information. It's really just to track how they use the site, what purchases they made, a really base level. And that's a majority of the tracking.
Yeah, the term tracking is so broad and was just sort of thrown out into the ether at one point, and it's never really been explained. I think there's a lot of rules and regulations about the internet that have never really been explained to the average user. So yeah, most tracking information is just where you click on a site, what sites you click on, how long you stay on a site. It's nothing creepy. It's nothing super personal. It's just a way for us to kind of figure out who you are as a person. Do they like the snowboarding equipment over the skiing equipment? So okay, they're probably more into snowboarding. So I want to show them more ads related to snowboarding equipment over skiing equipment, things like that.
And really, the only way that companies are getting that personal information is if it's collected as first party data. So if someone's filling out a form, putting their email address in, that's really the only time that the personal information is getting passed along. Just because you're using a website, none of that information is visible to the site owner. And I think it's really important for people to understand that.
It's like voluntarily given information. So, like when you put your birthday on Facebook, that's voluntarily put out there into the world. And like you said earlier, Facebook owns that as part of their first party data and can use that as part of their tracking audiences. So, everything that we get with tracking is more of just this broad level of who you are as a person, not your name, your email address, your phone number. All of that stuff has to be like voluntarily given up by the user. And like I said earlier, tracking is really important for smaller businesses. A lot of my clients rely on Facebook advertising and Instagram advertising to reach more relevant customers. So, for a small business that can't afford to spend money on commercial advertising or just dump money on Amazon advertising or on Google, they rely on Facebook because it is a little bit more affordable and they can reach the users that are more relevant to them. So, it does help them reach new people, people that are interested in their products and services, and allows them to make the most out of their marketing budget.
I think something that most people don't think about is how much access we have to so many different brands. We're able to find these new brands we love that really align with our values, that are these small little guys that otherwise we might never have known about. They might have never existed because they could never get their name out there. So a lot of digital marketing really has enabled these smaller brands get off the ground and compete with the big box stores. So tracking is super important to help these smaller brands and even bigger brands maximize that ad spend. And without the ability to effectively run digital marketing, then you would be stuck with just Target and Walmart and all the big box stores running everything because they know they have these massive advertising budgets and can just pour money into it. So really the tracking is super important for users and consumers to get these relate these hyper specified products that really relate to their life that otherwise they might not really have a chance to learn about.
I can tell you, I've definitely been swayed on Instagram by these random companies, and they fit all the boxes, with candles or plants or sharks. And there was one that fit all three, and I was like, well, of course I have to buy this because this was literally a product that was made for me. So, I personally enjoy it. I enjoy seeing more relevant ads than just whatever is out there. Like you said, TV advertising is full of those big box stores and big brands like Coca-Cola, Target, insurance companies, and I don't want to waste my time on brands that aren't relevant to me. I want to find companies that are more related to my interests.
Yeah, my husband always laughs at me because he's like, "Oh, you're a digital marketer and yet you're buying Instagram ad products." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, they're literally exactly what I
Calling
want."
to me. Yeah.
This candle company donates a portion of all their proceeds to national parks. That's great. I definitely want to buy my candle from them instead of Target.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's really not all bad. And I think that's what we want to get that message out. And I think if people can kind of view it a little bit differently, it doesn't seem so kind of ominous.
hmm And when you opt out of tracking by these apps, you'll still be tracked by that first party data, that cookie, when you hit accept after you land on a site. Interest targeting on platforms, all of the information that you're putting out to Facebook, to LinkedIn, Twitter, anything like that, all of your activity on these platforms, is being stored in some way. So we're still going to be able to reach people, just not as effectively as we once were, essentially.
And if you're not using UTMs on your Facebook ads yet, definitely something you'll be wanting to do, because if someone does opt out of the tracking on the Facebook app, you have UTMs on your ads, that data will still pass into Google Analytics. So you still will be able to view a lot of the attribution data in Google Analytics that might be lost in the Facebook platform.
Super helpful. UTM's mandatory.
All right, so now our Director of Marketing Strategy, Maria, is going to talk about how SEO can be key to solving some of these privacy issues.
Thanks, Caroline. So the question some of you might be asking is, what can be done to get around all of these privacy changes? And besides pivoting and adapting in all the ways that Connie and Jenny have talked about, the answer for me is easy. It's invest in SEO. Even with all of these privacy changes that are taking place in the digital marketing world, SEO is remaining largely unaffected. So these changes are really just further proof that SEO is an essential part of your marketing, your website, and essential more now than ever. As I said, as Connie and Jenny have been saying, users can opt out of having their data collected. So with that loss that the advertisers are having, that level of information that helps them connect and serve relevant ads, relevant content, they're not able to talk to their target audience as well via paid modalities. And SEO is that space filler. SEO is how we reach users organically without, paying for the placement in Google or Facebook, whatever paid app platform we're using. It's really a great way to still target and show in the search engines, maybe just a little bit lower, but still in a very relevant way, on the same terms and concepts that your users are looking for and that you're trying to rank for in the paid realm.
And I think a big thing is being aware that remarketing and those audience sizes are going to be smaller. That's one of the downsides of some of these privacy changes. We're aware of that, but because your remarketing audiences are going to be smaller, you really want to have that authority in the organic SERPs, because if someone saw your ad or even clicked your ad and then goes back and searches for something, whether it's the actual brand or just the product, they're going to have that brand recognition when they see your organic listing in the SERP. So you're going to want to show up there organically as well.
Yeah, there's a real psychology to, users seeing you, sometimes, having the paid placement as well as the organic placement. But to Jenny's point, popping back and forth, the more they see you, the more, they start to trust and see that, you must have a good product. You must be related to what they're looking for. So, to that point, these privacy updates, though there's a lot happening, it really doesn't affect how we're going to rank organically. And I think now, again, more than ever, as I said previously, developing quality content is the way to start to, fill the gap. I don't want to say like, fight or replace ads. We're never going to get rid of ads. And if anything, as Jenny mentioned and Connie earlier, they're getting better. The way that Google's adapting with Flock, it's going to help us to really find the right people, even more so than now. So, adding SEO to the mix is only going to help you to fill that gap and maybe rely just a little bit less on ads and get that same, traffic organically, or, in the free side of Google. We really, in the SEO world, rely on Google Analytics information. So making sure your website tracks well and understands user interactions and how people are finding your site. But also using tools like SEMrush and Moz to gain keyword insights in question phrases, things like that. Like, what are the different ways that people are searching, trying to find your site? So we rely on a totally different set of data to help get our insights and how we're going to organically target users.
And even before all these changes, your PPC and your SEO really should be working together, and you should be focusing on both. I've always said that if PPC is the sprint, SEO is the marathon. So you might get there quicker with your search ads, but you're never going to get as far because you're always paying for those clicks. So having the combination of the short term and the long term by investing in both paid and SEO really ensures that you're going to maximize your reach and really have that longevity in the search results. So now more than ever, really wanting to make sure that you're balancing what your efforts are for PPC and really how you can maximize that ad spend with these changes, and then also balancing the SEO and the organic side of it, where you know that they're not going to be as affected, but it does take a little more time.
Yeah, they really work together. They're not, competing. They really do have a magic that can happen between them when you're working both sides integrated and considering the other and how you can benefit off one another.
And just jumping in from the PPC side, even though we can create landing pages to send paid traffic to, it's really, really beneficial for you to have a website that's properly developed from all angles. So if you're on the fence, I would recommend getting an SEO audit done first, because you don't want to spend money to send traffic to a site that's not really robust organically. So that would be my biggest piece of advice there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Connie. It's not just, the content side of things. It's making sure that things are properly developed. And there's that whole other aspect of SEO that's like the technical health, right? It's not just the content and creative. So, the content and creative is great, but if it doesn't properly function, then it's no good. And it's all, intertwined. So then ads won't perform as well, and we can just spiral from there. So really, I think, the long and short of it here is SEO plus PPC is a real winning strategy for us to move forward, especially out of these bigger privacy changes that are happening right now. So another interesting stat we wanted to share with all of you is the following. Over half of all consumers, 51%, trust that a brand will protect their information. So this kind of goes back to that earlier slide where we're seeing that users seemingly do trust websites and they're having a good experience. This actually surprised me. I wasn't really sure, I guess, where this number was going to come out, but it again shows how serious companies are taking data and that is translating to users. So some different ways to try and build trust if you think you might be suffering from this, or even to just do like a health check and make sure you're in a good place, would be to check your privacy policy. If you're running ads online, you should have a privacy policy on your website that covers you and kind of details out how you're using data. So if you don't have one, definitely look into adding one. It's a small way, again, to start to convey to consumers, that you are taking all of their data very seriously and going to do your utmost to protect it. Another way to build trust, or another thing to think about as you audit your website and ensure that you're really meeting consumers' needs, is to review all of your forms. So as much as you'll have a privacy policy in place telling users how we're going to use their data, it's good to review our forms, whether it's a contact us form, white paper form, demo, and ensure that we're really only asking for information that we need. And we're not just data mining to build a profile for the user. I think some of us have had experiences in the past, different forms that you filled out on various websites, and you're like, well, why do they need that information? I really just want to give my name and my email or this or that. And that can send a message, especially if it's a required field, that you're just trying to gather as much information as possible, which can, then in turn hurt your trust. So definitely audit your forms on your website, make sure you're only collecting the information you need, and make sure you have a proper privacy policy in place to help build trust.
So we just kind of wanted to recap some of the immediate and next steps that marketers can take to pivot and adapt to online privacy changes, as we've kind of observed in the industry the last couple of years with GDPR, the California, Consumer Privacy Act, and some other states are developing new laws. I know one is coming up on the docket in Colorado. So it's going to continue to have an impact on our role as advertisers and as qualified advertisers. So what you want to do is take advantage of the targeting tools still at your disposal. So retargeting is still available. It's just, may not be as robust of a grouping as it once was. So you definitely want to anticipate potential changes or delays to audience sizes, reporting. So look at your audiences now, then, set a timer for yourself for 30 days from now and see if it's been impacted at all. We don't know how many people are going to potentially opt back in, if any. So it's a really good idea to know how much visibility you're losing. You can only really do that by keeping track of the data now. So you also want to leverage workarounds when possible. So using your customer lists, creating lookalike audiences from them. Maybe, even if you do have that data from your customers, their job titles, where they live, use that to kind of influence your target audiences. If you see a lot of traffic coming from Texas and Florida and New York, they're probably going to be, the geos that you want to target for your prospecting audiences. For your retargeting audiences, if you want to look at a longer range of visitors, so if you were previously targeting 30 days, you can open it up to 60 days or 90 days just to kind of get more visibility while you can. And take a fresh look at prospecting campaigns. So like we said before, focus on acquiring new leads rather than just retargeting existing ones. So we are in the industry of marketing, and the idea is to market to new people. So unfortunately, those KPIs might take a hit, but you'll be getting new customers, which is the main goal here.
And I think with the drop in our capabilities from remarketing, it's really important to revisit CRO. So conversion rate optimization. is going to be more important than ever to try to make sure that your landing pages are driving people to your CTAs properly, making it as easy as possible for people to convert. Maria kind of talked about, only asking for the information you actually need for forms to really encourage people to fill out forms, offering, backup CTAs if they're not really interested in your first one. There's a lot of effort that can go and should go into CRO. The more people you can convert the first time around, the less reliant you need to be on the remarketing. Another big thing is to realize that there's a lot of different ways to analyze the data. Yes, we're losing some visibility within the Facebook platform, but properly using UTMs and leveraging our conversion IQ, we really are able to track the quality of those leads past just that initial reporting. So really looking in the CRM to say, I know this lead came from Facebook, even though Facebook isn't reporting it, and making sure that you're not just turning campaigns off or optimizing based on a single point of data. There's also different attribution in Google Analytics. You can look at first click, last click, linear. I think really looking at the full picture, even just looking at overall lift in sales or overall lift in leads based on your advertising efforts is really important. I think with digital marketing, we've been able to really pinpoint every little bit of data. And sometimes it gets lost that you need to look at the full picture kind of from that 10,000 foot view sometimes.
Definitely. I think, the last way that we've already kind of recapped and only moments ago that we can really pivot and adapt to all these changes is investing in SEO. Using the organic means to target the same audiences in terms you would in the paid world. The return, as we mentioned, is not as immediate. It's that long-term game, but it will help you show better in the SERPs and ultimately help your ads perform better and land more users on your site with all of that relevant content.
All right. Thank you to Jenny, Maria, and Connie. That was a great conversation. I personally learned so much, and I work with you guys every day. So love that. Here is a brief kind of discussion recap. I'm not going to go through all of the takeaways because we just discussed them, but the main ones I think to keep in mind are that privacy changes won't stop advertisers from reaching consumers through paid ads. Investing in SEO is more crucial than ever, and then reviewing your cross-channel performance and attribution can really help you continue to showcase how your digital marketing initiatives are succeeding. So now I'm going to launch one last poll. We went through a lot of stuff today, and I know not everyone has the same resources, so this is just if you are interested in one of Hawk's free, no obligation PPC or SEO analyses. We do sort of mini audits that discuss your goals, talk about your program, kind of show you some things that we think you could do to improve, performance projections, all that good stuff. And I'm going to keep this poll running in the background, and we are going to launch the Q&A. So we have a few questions from the audience, and we can jump right into those. And to everyone here, if you have any questions, you can still type them into the Q&A box, and we'll see how many we can get to in these last 10 or 15 minutes. So I have one from Sam who asks, how do I use customer lists on Facebook?
I can jump in here. So essentially customer lists on Facebook, it's very similar to using them on Google or LinkedIn, using that first party data that you have at your disposal. So if you have a newsletter list, probably, the biggest one that you have is your newsletter subscribers. You essentially just take that list. The minimum of what you need is essentially just an email, but if you have more personal modifiers like their first name, their birthday, potentially, all of that is going to help match them to the proper users on Facebook. And it's not going to match everybody. Obviously, there are lots of people who don't have a Facebook account. So the more the merrier. If you want to get more intricate with your customer lists, so breaking them down into, people who frequently purchase, who frequently interact with your brand, people who maybe purchase from you once a year, to really kind of get to know them a little bit better. That's kind of something that you're going to have to work internally with your CRM to figure out. But you can definitely just upload them to the audience segment and then use them in your ads. I recommend using them in their own separate campaigns, so that way you don't get confused about who's targeting what. And then you can also create more personalized ads for those users. So someone who's subscribed to your newsletter and who's familiar with your brand, they're not going to need the whole spiel about your, who you are as a company or what you make. They're already aware of that. So you can really dive in with the ad copy and with, the content, and make sure that the ads are as relevant as possible to those users.
Gotcha. Great. So Sean asked, what kind of stuff do I need to include in my privacy policy, or where do I kind of start to ensure that I am compliant? Because I know that was something that you guys had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I can take this one. So as far as your full privacy policy, obviously you'll want to talk with your legal team to make sure you're covering any legalities regarding your industry or your products you're selling. But in terms of digital marketing, if you are running Google Analytics on a website, or if you are running remarketing, there are certain bits and pieces that need to be included in that privacy policy, along with opt-out links. So there'll be a section about your tracking, about your Google Analytics tracking, and then sections for which types of remarketing and retargeting you're using based on channel, with the opt-out option for each one. If you're not really sure what that is, you can talk to Hawk. We have kind of some examples and can help you make sure that your privacy policy is covering all the dots in terms of digital marketing.
Perfect. So next, Amanda asked, if someone accepts ad tracking, does that make them more prone to things like identity theft?
I think the short answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, no. I don't know how that would even happen, but I can't see that being a thing ever.
I think where that would come into play is, Maria talked about websites that appear to be data mining. So just be conscious of where you're putting your information on the internet. If you're on kind of like not the most reputable website and they're asking for, your phone number, your email address, your address or zip code, like all sorts of weird information that might not be relevant, you might want to consider that website might be data mining. That data might be sold to another company. So really, it's that first party data where you run into that kind of a thing. But tracking, like we talked about earlier, really doesn't include any of that personally identifiable information.
Gotcha. I'm sure that puts people's minds at ease, and that makes a lot of great. So thank you to our panelists and speakers, and thank you to everyone for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And if we didn't get to your question, or if you have a question for us later, you can always reach out to us at info@hawksem.com. And we should be, like I said, sending out this recording within the next 48 hours or so. So keep an eye on your inbox for that as well. Hopefully you got a lot out of this and have some tangible takeaways to bring back to your team. And remember that you can request free, no obligation PPC or SEO analysis from HawkSEM after this is over by just heading to hawksem.com/webinar-audit-request. And that's it, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.